All right, folks, welcome back to another episode of the McKinney Podcast, our last episode of the day, number 5. So, do you get tired of recording these blocks, Fred, or are you just as amped up as you were this morning?
It's like the hard part is trying to turn off my mind and the questions and things I want to say from the previous sessions to this one, because I'm like, this is new guest, new situation, can't ask those, but because it's all McKinney related, I could just as easily say, hey, and pose that question, but we have a topic.
This is going to be a very interesting episode because the guest doesn't really need any introduction at all. I think everybody knows who George Fuller is, whether you know him personally or just by reputation. George has been on as a regular guest, episode 1, way back in May of last year. We actually recorded it in early April of last year and sat on it for 3 weeks before we released it because we weren't quite ready yet. But then George and I were on a separate episode back during the election season talking about Prop A that was ultimately defeated by a pretty narrow measure, within 5%.
Yeah, within 2.
Was it within 2?
49-51.
How about that?
I didn't know the exact number. Of course you do. That's near and dear to your heart. You put a lot of effort into that. The theme today is different because I'm not James in this episode. If you ever watch the old show, the Stephen Colbert Show, a lot of folks don't realize that part that he played was a bit. He was literally just acting as a brazen conservative talk show host when the person, Stephen Colbert, had nothing to do with that character that was portrayed. And there's been a lot of noise on the airport. The city council, as we record this just a few days ago, formally voted to approve certain measures with airport expansion. Yep. There's just a lot of chatter, a lot of noise on the subject, still a lot of misinformation, people saying that we voted down the airport expansion when they in fact voted down the bond issue that funded the airport expansion. The noise, it just required some very specific commentary from the man himself, who is championing and continues to champion, even as his 8 years as mayor comes to a close in a few months. And whatever your next chapter is, I'm sure the good people of McKinney will both love it and hate it as they feel appropriate.
Hey, I will be taking some time off, flying out of TKI to any number of destinations next year. That's what I'll be doing.
Amen to that. So in McKinney Cares, which I regret ever allowing my name to get put out as an admin of that group, Michael Jones was like, hey, looking for a couple of good people to help step in. And my wife said, don't do it. Don't. I know how you are. Don't do it. And Fred and I both stepped in, at large part because of this podcast. It makes sense for us to have better access to the good people of McKinney. And I have taken a stand on the airport. I have not made my views any sort of secret as an individual, not as a representative of this podcast or the corporate entities and municipal entities that we are in an in-kind relationship with.
Or even as an admin in the group.
Yeah,
you were
exactly.
Just James Jenkins.
And
citizen.
I specifically said, as an admin of the group, I don't have an opinion on this subject. As an individual, as a citizen, I absolutely do. So let me just say, as a clarification, I do not speak on behalf of McKinney Chamber of Commerce, the EDC, or Mykowski or his staff. I don't speak on behalf of City Community Impact Newspaper or One Heart McKinney or Scott Elliott or Visit McKinney and Aaron Warner and his staff. I do not speak on behalf of any of those people when I speak as an individual. And it's an important distinction to draw because I never want people to feel like the media institutions that they participate in and consume are systemically biased. I know Michael Jones has certain feelings as an individual that he will not express as the main admin of a group with 41,000 people in it, most of whom are residents and citizens of McKinney. So here's the setup. That was the longest preamble ever. This episode is going to be either terribly entertaining or terribly frustrating, depending on your viewpoint. Hopefully someone's out there in the middle. I'm looking at you, like the 8% of voters that are available to swing one way or the other. Some of you don't have a strong opinion one way or the other. Some of you don't even realize that this is a thing. You're just living your lives and doing your job and hanging out with your family and friends and loved ones. You aren't even really paying attention to this subject. If that's you, great. Hopefully you find this whole conversation enlightening. So what's the point of the episode? George is going to be here as the mouthpiece, the spokesperson, the advocate for the expansion of the airport, and I am going to be the antagonist. George and I spoke a few days ago and tried to figure out who are we going to invite for the other side? Who are we going to invite to speak against the airport? And neither one of us could come up with a good name of an individual that was capable of coming in here and being vigorous in their defense against the airport without being belligerent or just difficult in a,
and speaking
in a rhetorical sort of way, and speaking in
fact,
conjecture
in facts.
and opinion and feelings and emotions and squishy stuff that cannot be quantified or verified, because your feelings are your feelings and you're free to have your feelings. I think I speak for George and Fred when I would encourage people on issues of great importance, such as the airport, such as Sunset McKinney Amphitheater, such as expansion along the 121 corridor, or any other big thing. You're not giving into your own personal preferences and your own selfish desires that are perfectly natural for an individual to have, but in a civic context. A city such as ours only thrives when people are willing to set aside individual preferences for the greater good, and recognizing that certain things may be great for the whole, even if they're inconvenient for some of the whole. Like folks who live next door to the piece of dirt where the Sunset Amphitheater is going to be built. It's going to be inconvenient for them. They may hate the project because they're too close to it. They don't like it. Just as an example. In this episode, I'm not James. I am the heel. I am the embodiment of all of the rhetoric and comments and arguments against the airport, those questions that should be asked. I have been reviewing notes and whatnot, trying to do my best to speak on behalf of the people that feel very strongly that the airport is a bad idea. And I say this in all sincerity. I do not say anything in this episode to mock, demean, belittle, poke fun at, or anything like that. I have a hard job because I personally, as an individual, I feel very, very strongly that the airport is a wonderful idea, a massive positive, and we'll be able to use that airport to bludgeon our competitors and make McKinney more prosperous and more powerful in the region and in the country than our local neighbors. There's certain advantages that Frisco has over McKinney. We don't have. We don't have Universal coming. We don't have a PGA massive complex. We don't have the Star practice facility. We don't have a lot of skyscrapers on Dallas North Tollway. We don't have the Tollway corridor. But there's certain things that we have that our neighbors around simply don't have. That being said, that's not the perspective I'm taking. Starting right now, officially, look at your timestamp, boys and girls. At the 8-minute and 20-second mark, I officially think the airport is a terrible idea, and shame on you, Mr. Mayor, you shameless profiteering buffoon who doesn't listen to anybody. You just do whatever you dang well please. How dare you, sir?
Yeah, I hear that. I hear that quite a bit.
What is your personal gain, George? You're not listening to the people of McKinney. We voted this thing down. There was a bond issue on the ballot, and we voted it down. We don't want the airport expansion. We don't want to pay for it. We don't want city debt. Why aren't you listening to the voters, George?
Yeah, and this isn't the first time I've heard that, of course. What I would say is that, first of all, the election wasn't about do we want an airport. The question wasn't, hey, McKinney, do you want to have the convenience of commercial flights flying to major markets, what will grow to be $1 billion annual economic impact, cultural benefits, all those benefits of an airport. The question was, do you want to sign up for $200 million of general obligation debt for which the city will impose a tax sufficient to pay the principal and interest? Now, the opposition, unfortunately, got in the way of letting people really understand the true facts. And what they said, I saw things out there that, hey, this airport, here's the language on the ballot, which is state mandated language. Here's the language on the ballot, and they're going to raise taxes $5,000 for every single household in the city of McKinney. Of course, do the math, and that's an insane thing if you take the time to do the math and see what that really would equate to. But there was a lot of fear in people, and I talked to so many people after the fact that said, "Man, I love the idea of the airport, but another tax? We don't need another tax." I had people that moved here from California near John Wayne who have a airport line item on their tax bill, and they said they were told that would be the same thing here in McKinney. And hey, look at the bond language. The city was going to impose a tax. Unfortunately, that bond referendums like that, there's not the ability to say to people, "Hey, we have the bonding capacity to bond for this debt. While we retire old debt, we can maintain the same interest and sinking rate portion of your tax rate and won't have any increase in property taxes." We're not able to discuss that on a bond referendum. People make the decision based on those two sentences. So that's what the city voted down. The city voted down, and understandably, right? Again, if you're faced with a question that appears like you're going to have yet another tax imposed on you, man, I don't know what that tax is going to be. I'm told it's $5,000 a household. You know what? I'll continue driving to DFW. I don't want it bad enough to pay this unknown, or if I listen to the opposition, this huge amount of tax, all of which, of course, was untrue. So first and foremost, that was the question. I also hear all the time that I own all the land around the airport. Now, my wife is very upset about this. She's asking me, where's the deed? What if something happens to me? She's got to know how to sell it. Of course, I own no land around the airport, and the insinuations and baseless allegations of such about me or other members of council, that's accusing us of being what would be a felon. That would be a felony if we had some means to profit off an issue like this that we were voting on and advocating for. That would be illegal, and it would be a felony offense. So
you try to tell me, and you're stating here emphatically, you do not own any raw land that would profit or increase in value should this expansion go through. Because I've heard from a lot of people that you will personally, individually, you, George Fuller, not as mayor of McKinney, but as an individual citizen, that you will personally profit from this project. I've seen that all over the place. You tell me that's not true?
I've seen it all over the place as well. It is categorically as absurd and ridiculous as it is untrue. I've heard, let me be clear. Not only do I not own land, I don't have any friends that own land. I have no family that owns land. I don't know who the individual landowners are personally of any of the property out there, save and except if David Craig still owns any property out there. I certainly know David Craig, but don't know that he does or doesn't own property. But like all of us, I could go on Colin Cad and I could look at every tract of land around the airport and I could identify who that owner is. And I can also go back in time and see who that owner has been for the last number of years.
You mean to tell me that I don't have to worry about rumor and speculation, that I don't even have to file a Freedom of Information Act request? I can just go onto a website that's publicly available data and verify these rumors as whether they're true or not using objective fact? Is that what you're telling me, Mr. Mayor?
I'm telling you, I know that that's going to take a little effort and time.
But it's so much easier to rant in the comment section, George. You don't understand. I've got stuff to do.
Hey,
I am retired. I have to see my grandkids. I have to go check on my bee colony and collect my honey. I have stuff to do. I don't have time to go to the CAD, George.
Listen, if truth is not important in your communication, then absolutely don't take the 2 minutes to go on Colin CAD and look that up. It's much easier to repeat the baseless allegations. What's crazy, by the way, we talk about all the opposition to the airport. I went on one of the sites, and this woman who posts a lot, I won't mention her by name, very anti-airport, and she had a post, and there was about 137 comments, and I literally took the time to go through, and I cataloged every single comment. 7 people made up 89.7% of the negative comments. But boy, those 7 people, they like to hear themselves talk, and they repeat untruth after untruth after untruth. It was crazy.
Well, let me make this easy for you. I'm going to hand Fred the mic because Fred is supposed to be the unfortunate sucker in this conversation who's stuck in between you and I can't stand your guts, George Fuller. I hate everything you are and everything you stand for.
Welcome to my hater group.
Okay, so with this last volley and exchange of information, the people voted, and they said no to the bond.
Yes.
But at the same time, we understand that expansion is moving forward.
Oh, yes.
And related to that, you not holding the title deed to that, what you're saying, both of you collectively, is that the property near and around the airport is worth a whole lot more and will be worth even more later. Because when I look at...
You don't sound objective to me. You're already taking sides.
That's just
I
fact.
expect you to be unbiased,
That
sir.
is just fact, because if you look at Love Field and the property around Love Field, that is some of the most expensive property we have here in the DFW, if I'm correct.
And even in the housing, if you look at, I used to live at Greenway Park, which is Mockingbird and Inwood. That's some of the most expensive real estate in Dallas. Preston Hollow, of course, Devonshire, all those areas. And that's right around the airport, just as a side note.
Okay.
Residentially as well. Now,
And
commercial property, of course, is the area land right around the airport.
Absolutely.
But
So
very valuable.
if you are a developer, if you're an investor, then the airport expansion is definitely in your interest because it is going to net a good return on that investment.
You know, I would say it's in the interest of every single person that pays taxes in the city. If you're a business owner, a restaurant owner, a hospitality in the hospitality business, if you're an employer, if you live here with family who lives elsewhere, if you travel for your work, again, back to if you pay taxes, this is going to benefit you. It's going to benefit you from, of course, there's the convenience. I talked about family outside of here where you travel a lot. It's certainly more convenient to drive to TKI than it is other airports. But the tax benefit, you know, when you talk about what will be over probably by year 4 or 5, $1 billion a year annual economic impact, $1 billion. That money is money that is in our community, spent in our community, additional sales tax dollars that gets generated, ad valorem that gets generated. This is a huge benefit that ultimately subsidizes property and school taxes in a large, large way. You know, our general fund, or our general fund is funded by several things, primarily property tax and sales tax. There's some other franchise fees and this and that. But the more sales tax revenues that we collect, the less we have to rely on property taxes. That's a fact.
You know, I just find it really hard to believe that you're going to build what is the new thing, $70 million that you're taking from the taxpayers. When we didn't give you your 200, you're still taking 70. How does that even happen, by the way?
So by making smart decisions, I'll start there. But so when we talk about the $75 million, we're talking about $15 million for the terminal. The $60 million, the other $60 million is for improvements that serve that airport for general aviation and current operations. You know, we have 430 plus operations every single day out of that airport. And we are almost built out completely on the west side of the airport. And for us to continue having the huge success that we have had over recent years in corporate relocations, business relocations, expansions. You look at Raytheon, which has expanded, gosh, it's got to be pushing $1 billion now over the last 8 years. If you talk to Raytheon, they will tell you that the airport is a key top item considered when they're looking at the various campuses across the country to develop, because they use our airport on a regular basis. They fly 737s in and out of our airport on a regular basis. So the benefit of that airport and how it transcends from companies, all the different types of businesses, to residents, to ultimately, again, subsidizing taxes.
Now, Fred, in the interest of time, I want you to take down these questions, these negative impacts that I've heard from so many of my friends, of people that are concerned about the airport. They think the expansion is a terrible idea. It really comes down to 4 categories: noise, traffic, environmental impact, and taxation. All 4 of those are big, huge, fat negatives. And then I have some questions alongside of that, risk factors that I'm not entirely sure if any of you guys have even considered or not. I don't know if anybody's thinking about all the potential downsides. All of you guys are having these glorious, wonderful ideas with all these rosy expectations. You big group of stupid optimists. It drives me crazy. What happens if it's not the best thing? What happens if something less than your projections come in? I've got some questions after those 4 things that I want to talk about. Like, what happens if we bring in an airline and they go belly up? Because, I mean, Frontier and Spirit operate out of Love Field. Both of those airlines have significant economic challenges already. What happens if we can't get Southwest like we think we can? We arrogantly expect we'll just get Southwest. What happens if not? What happens if there's a big economic downturn and the bond market goes upside down and we can't get the yields we thought we were going to get? We end up paying way more in interest than we projected, and then the city's on the hook for all kinds of negative stuff. You're not writing these questions down, Fred. Come on now.
I wrote it down: noise, traffic, environment, and
But my
taxes.
question is, what about the risk factors? What about the things we're not considered? You have all these studies on the positive side. What about the studies on the negative side? Who's looking at this from a negative perspective going, what are all the terrible things that can happen, that if any of them happen, the good people of McKinney are on the hook for it? You're still not writing down my questions, Fred.
Well, that's because,
These
I
questions
don't
are
have enough,
cataloged.
I don't have enough crayon here, but
I'm going to put my
know.
James hat on for just a second. These are actual questions
Yes,
that people have
absolutely.
posed,
Yes,
that
I've seen
people
them.
in McKinney
I've
Cares
seen
and other
them.
groups expect an
Yes.
answer to.
Yes.
I'm being a little facetious, but I'm dead serious. These are questions that people are asking that they expect answers
Yeah,
to.
so let's jump into it.
So let's do the negative stuff first.
Yep.
Because am I right? Those are the four big negatives that everybody seems to talk about.
So traffic. People talk about traffic, and it's all based out of emotion, of course. None of the people that are talking have looked at any of the TxDOT traffic studies or engineering traffic.
So there are
studies.
studies,
There are actually studies, absolutely, and
like
they were
publicly
presented-
available studies.
Publicly available. Matter of fact, it's so funny all this noise, but here we had a environmental assessment open house for the public, and 25 people show up, which is so sad because if you have questions, man, you can go and get actual data, actual facts, versus the nonsensical stuff that you'll read online, especially on some of the sites.
Kind of like how the total number of votes cast in the bond vote make up less than 12% of McKinney's population. The total number on both sides, less than 12% of McKinney's population. Absolutely shameful.
It's shameful.
Okay,
I'm going to come back to that.
You touched on a point though about the. Well, actually, go ahead because
We've
we're
got
gonna
to
talk
stay
about
on
traffic,
course, or
yeah.
else the listeners are going to get
Yeah,
frustrated.
I've got. Okay, go ahead.
Where was I?
Your
Traffic.
the
Traffic.
TxDOT studies.
TxDOT traffic
so
studies.
TxDOT traffic studies. If you don't want to take the time to go look at the studies, let me give you some anecdotal evidence, but one based in actual numbers and facts. So not quite so anecdotal, but you've got HEB located in the center of our town. I've said this before. On any given Saturday or Sunday, there's 25,000 people that are at that HEB. That's in the center of our town, serviced by two roads, Custer and El Dorado.
Mm-hmm.
Our airport, of course, there's some roads under construction right now, TxDOT building Spur 399, 380 bypass, but ultimately, in the next number of years, it's going to be serviced by all major highways coming from every direction. And it's on the outskirts of town, and we're talking about, right now, 2,000 people a day. So, if you're not concerned, if you have braved your way to HEB with 25,000 people going a day in the center of our town on one of those two roads, my guess is you've got the courage to brave the airport by major highway with 2,000 people going a day. That's my wild guess. And my guess is that you won't experience the bogged down, bumper-to-bumper traffic that someone might want you to believe happens with this airport.
I just find it really hard to believe that the already terrible situation on 380, on whatever that spur number is that I can't think of, 399, coming off of Highway 5, a.k.a. McDonald, a.k.a. Plano Road, a.k.a. Greenville Road, a.k.a. whatever the 12 names are.
All of which are being rebuilt to a major highway.
So 399 is going to be one of the main things. What about the east side? Because those are two-lane farm-to-market roads right now.
Yeah, so ultimately, and when I say ultimately, we're talking about the next 5 to 6 years. You will, if you're coming from the east, you're going to be coming 380, and you'll take the 380 bypass spur and then down 399. If you're coming from the north, you're coming down Central Expressway, you're going to hit the 380 bypass. If you're coming from the south, you're going to be coming up Central Expressway, take spur 399. If you're coming from the west, you're going to be coming across probably 121 if you're coming from the south, 380 if you're coming from the north. And all the major highways will be servicing this airport, again, on the outskirts of our town.
So here's the thing. Okay, McKinney, you have your say, and the people of McKinney and whatnot. What about the people that don't get a vote, George?
Yeah.
What about the folks in Princeton, or the folks in Fairview, or the folks in other tiny little towns that I can't even think of right now because I don't remember their names because they're this big, literally. Yeah. All of these people are victimized by the bullies in McKinney that are trying to have their way, and those folks don't even get a vote. They're literally under your thumb, and I just hate it.
And it is unfortunate, right? If you live in Heritage Ranch, and I think that was developed, if I'm not mistaken, 2006. It's unfortunate if you bought your home in 2006 south of an airport that was built in 1976. that has been talked about being the next commercial airport for the last 30 years. It's unfortunate, and I guess if I made that decision, and I don't say this unempathetically, but if I'm going to buy a house in a subdivision or in a city south of an airport, that's probably got to weigh into my decision on the front side. I don't know that it's right to then demonize the caretakers of that facility, the ones with the fiduciary responsibility, in this case the City of McKinney, which owns it, to demonize the City of McKinney to continually advance that airport, expand that airport for the benefit of McKinney and the region. I don't know that's the fair thing to do. I would also say that, again, I don't say this without empathy. I get it. But if no roads, no railroads, no airports were built, if there was anyone in opposition or there wasn't anyone that could be negatively impacted, and absolutely, if you live in close proximity or you're in a place where the road is coming through your property, you are impacted negatively. There's no doubt. But if none of those things happened, unless there was zero negative impact or at least perceived impact, we'd all be on horseback. We wouldn't have roads. We wouldn't have rail. We wouldn't have airports. There are going to be I'll call it inconvenience casualties, and that's just a truth. It's again, don't say it without empathy for somebody that bought their home by an airport. All that said, right now with 430 operations a day out of our airport, many of which are training exercises, smaller, loud, piston aircraft flying at low altitude, doing just circular patterns, doing touch and goes at our airport. The complaints we get are about those planes flying at low altitude over their house. It's not about the 737 that Raytheon. Matter of fact, I don't think we've ever received a complaint about a 737 taking off or landing at the airport. Why? Well, they have a very specific route. The FAA directs their route, whether on approach or in leaving the airport. Right now, they're leaving to the south. What that traffic pattern will be is to the south and east over Lake Lavon. If you're going to the north, it's to the north and to the east. And those jets, commercial passenger service jets, get up and out quick. They're not doing circular touch and goes. They're not buzzing rooftops. All of that talk is emotional. I get it. And if you're living over there right now, and you've got a Piper that's or a Cessna 150 that's flying over your house, 10 times a day, the thought of passenger service, if you don't give it enough thought, you're going to think, my God, that little plane is going to be replaced with a big plane. I'm going to have the same issue. Well, no, you actually won't. It's a very different pattern. It's a very different flight operation. And again, we're talking about adding 6 to 12 commercial jets a day to a 430 operation airport. What's that impact really going to be?
Yeah, and that was the point I was going to bring up earlier, that you kind of slipped it in there with Raytheon, in the previous segment, that they're already flying in and flying out. And, for all the people that have noise ordinance, or not noise ordinance, but have noise as a concern, I don't think I've seen anybody on any social media forum saying, I can't stand the noise that these planes that this big jet is making. No one has stated that. And even then, I know that at times they're going down the driveway.
Hold please. I'm actually going to show you exactly where people have stated that. Continue. I'll
tell you this. During the bond, I had a meeting downtown McKinney, historic downtown on the square. I had a meeting with a group of people, and I specifically asked them to meet me between 12 and 1. I asked them to meet me between 12 and 1 because there were multiple 737s taking off and landing at the airport. And I had one of our staff was out at the airport. They filmed it. They videoed it. And while I spoke to that group of people, they were, this particular group, convinced and saying that, hey, if commercial passenger service comes, it will destroy our downtown. And I said, you really believe that 737 flying in and out of the airport, 4 or so miles from here, 3 miles, whatever it was, is going to impact you? Absolutely. Well, do you know in the last hour we've had 3 take off and land? And of course they didn't believe that. Luckily I had video.
That's when you pull up your Skytrax app.
You can pull up Skytrax, show that as well.
Oh, I love Skytrax, man. That's so much fun. Sorry, I mean, I hate Skytrax, and that app that celebrates pollution and noise and traffic, it's awful. It's disgusting, that app is. Sorry, I reverted to this other person named James there for a second.
And another,
So-
go ahead.
No.
If you-
Here it is.
Okay.
Because Ken Holiday, that scoundrel, he was at the airport FBO in this disgusting monstrosity that they built there. All this concrete and glass and comfortable chairs. It's awful. And he was celebrating the FBO and how beautiful it is and an asset of whatever. And the very first comment there is, quote, from Amy, I'm not going to name her last name, but she's in the group, noise, traffic, there's already a nightmare, the list goes on. And 56 people liked that comment. And I quote, noise, traffic that is already a nightmare, the list goes on. I mean, what do you have to say for that, George? 56 people agree that the noise and the traffic is already a nightmare, and the list goes on.
Yeah. I bet you it was like by the same person on many different apparatuses. But anyway, all those things are quantifiable. And again, had those 56 people, if they were indeed 56 different people, shown up at the environmental assessment, they could understand actually what are the noise contours, where's the what noise will be generated from that airport, how far from the airport will you hear that noise, what decibel level will it be when you're hearing that noise, pollution, same thing, traffic, same thing. But there's actually a quantifiable known data, known facts to help people really understand, but they got to go through the effort to show up.
Yeah. Now, that may or may not be true, but what I'm going to need for your team to do is get me all of these things, all these studies, links to wherever. I don't have time for this, okay? I don't have time to look for it. If you want me to pay attention to all of your supposed facts or whatever, I need somebody on your team to make a list of where all these studies are done, environmental impact and noise and traffic and whatever, and give me a link to all of them so that I can read them and I can pass them around to my friends and get real data, because we have big feelings, George. We get mad,
If there was
really
only-
mad about this.
Yeah, if there was only a site, like maybe, I don't know, McKinneyTexas.org, where they put all that information.
You mean there's a site where I can go and read all of these things?
There is, but
Third-party objective fact?
But you got to stop typing on the keyboard with baseless stuff, and you got to actually type in a couple of web addresses. So,
But then I may have to actually speak more intelligently. I don't know if I want to do that.
I believe me, I see that quite often.
Okay, so other than what we've already talked about, the three things: noise, traffic, environmental.
Yep.
How in the world do you guys spend $75 million on the current FBO and God knows how much other stuff without raising everybody's taxes? Where is that going to come from, first off? And secondly, how in the world do you get to $1 billion a year? Billion with a B. That's a pretty big claim there, George.
That's a big claim, and again, all that information is available online. All the reports, all the economic analysis. But your first question was your first question about
How do you make it happen without raising my taxes?
yeah. So first of all, it's important to understand how airports are funded, and we are an FAA-funded airport, and we are much of the infrastructure that we're building. Most of the $75 million is infrastructure, and that infrastructure is available in reimbursement in grants from the FAA. You've got to build it first, got to qualify, and then you make application and you get reimbursed. And we've been very, very successful in our reimbursement rate for infrastructure at the airport, which has been great. Senator Cruz passed a bill recently, passed a bill that qualifies us as an emerging airport to get up to $20 million for terminal construction. Before that, you had to have actual threshold of commercial enplanements before you could qualify, which of course made it difficult, right? If you want to build a terminal, but you got to have the enplanements first, so that's kind of hard to do without the terminal. So this bill accommodates airports like ours that have that are transitioning from GA to commercial. So there's that grant that we'll go after. We'll go after reimbursement on all of the other infrastructure. We have sales tax revenue. That's our EDC and CDC, which are collect sales tax, of course, not just from McKinney residents, but anyone visiting. They will be taking out what's called a TIFIA loan, very low interest government loan for airport infrastructure. And those monies will be paid back Our plan is to pay those monies back with airport-related revenues, FAA reimbursements, no different than really what we do in other economic development endeavors at the city. So, our ability to fund this infrastructure without impacting property taxes is actually quite easy in this realm. It was possible with our larger, what would have been ultimately a $300 million terminal. This, of course, is a walk in the park when you compare it to that.
Okay, this is from a guy named Logan who actually has a reasonable, substantive comment. He's not just using emotion and feelings and whatnot. He says, I live in Lowry Crossing, 8 minutes from the airport, have no real issue with noise. My only concern is adding terminals for commercial passenger flights, which means traffic on 546 as well as the large intersections like Airport and 380. They're already really congested, especially during rush hour. 546 doesn't have any shoulders, no median, no turn lanes, really not anything to support any kind of increase in traffic. What do you say to someone who has a substantial conflict like that, a very specific road even?
Yeah.
The folks that live in Lowry Crossing, the folks that live in Princeton, which is right off the north end of the runway. Have you driven in Princeton recently? It's a freaking nightmare. The congestion and traffic is obscene. 380 is bad enough. 380 in Princeton, horrible.
Oh, yeah.
What are you guys going to do about that?
No doubt. And what we're going to do about that is, and the we in that answer, what are we going to do about it? We're talking, of course, about TxDOT. And what TxDOT is doing about that is they're rebuilding 380, some of it in place, some of it bypassed. They're rebuilding Spur 399. All of those projects are underway. Will this additional traffic, and we're talking, I think, on the study, if I'm not mistaken, it's 2 cars a minute, get potentially added during rush hour. Are those 2 cars going to be the straw that broke the camel's back? I'm going to guess no, but there will be 2 additional cars, right? I mean, it's going to be additional cars, and absolutely, until those roads get built, adding traffic in any capacity, you could argue, is going to have some growing pains. But again, you weigh when you're in my position and position of everyone else on council and EDC and CDC and TERS and P&Z and County Commissioners Court and our legislators and everyone that's supporting and advocating for this project, the decision that we make is what's the benefit, and how does that benefit weigh against that couple additional cars a minute, and of course the decision that we have all made in studying what that outcome is it's worth that inconvenience, whatever you want to apply to that those couple cars. How much you
Fred, is there anything you want to ask here? I want to give you room to speak before I jump into my 2 last big questions that I expect a good answer from Mr. Mayor over here.
Well, I just more observation, because we talk about the traffic impact and the additional people, but when I think about McKinney, what we have to offer are downtown. We have attraction points, and I listed here, of course, you mentioned the Star and Rough Rider Stadium and Legacy West and all those other things, and that's great. That's great for over there, but we have something truly unique here, and a whole bunch of small business owners on top of restaurants, hotels, and other service-based industries that, yes, we might complain about additional traffic on the streets, but the restaurant owner is not going to complain about additional traffic through his door, or whether it's the million donut shops we have around here. It's just one thing I'd say. No, they're not going to complain about the additional income coming in there. And yes, while there potentially could be an increase in taxes and stuff like that, if you have more income coming in, then those burdens aren't quite as front and center. So I know I'm supposed to be just maintaining a neutrality here, but my goal was to see what are the aspects and the things that are negative in some sense, but definitely positive in others.
Yeah, and I would, you mentioned again about taxes. Airports are economic drivers, period. They're economic drivers. They're economic drivers to the region. You can look historically at what do property values do when commercial passenger service is added to an airport. You can historically see that they increase, that the boom in the economy is very tangible. These are things that have a domino effect, and there's direct and indirect benefits, direct and indirect jobs. Those things all, at the end of the day, end up coming into the city coffers in the way of, again, sales tax dollars, business ad valorem tax dollars, things that subsidize our property taxes and our school taxes, for that matter. So, it's if you really take the time to educate yourself on what the impact is and what it can be based on, again, there's reports that have been done on economic impact studies. TxDOT did the first one that currently shows us at about $300 million a year with our GA operations. You look at the newer impact study, adding commercial passenger service, but then also look historically. Look historically at communities that have added passenger service, and when they've transitioned, what has happened in those communities. And we talked about, what's the next, what happens with the next COVID, and you make this investment. Point to a single airport in the country that closed down post-COVID. Airports don't close down. Roads don't close. People continue to travel, continue to drive, albeit there was a dip in that industry for sure, as there was in every industry, from cruise lines to venues like mine. But at the end of the day, that's not a constant. That's a reaction to in the market to a once in a lifetime, hopefully, event.
And I love that point you bring up about the airports. Name a dense, economically successful area that does not have an airport beside it.
Imagine DFW without DFW Airport. Imagine what would not be without DFW Airport. And then you can start to imagine, even if you don't want to take the time, which I would encourage everyone, take the time, educate yourself on these things. But if you don't, you can take a reasonable guess. If DFW Airport wasn't in Dallas, the industry, the business, how much of that would be there if we didn't have that transportation hub on the scale that we do in North Texas?
And we've got a new venue coming in with top tier class name acts, and just like people came in for, well, people still come in for the Cowboys game, but as well as the who was the big fight between
Jake Paul and Mike Tyson.
Yeah. The number of people that flew in for that, we're going to have those same people. Why should those dollars go to Dallas if they can't come?
Byron Nelson, or
Guys, I've got to reel you back in. I swear, the two of you are just sickening optimists. It's the most disgusting thing. You shameless capitalist pigs. I mean, what happens if this doesn't work out to your perfectly rosy, wonderful expectations? What happens if somebody decides to open an airport in Sherman, or the existing airports in Denton, or Alliance in Fort Worth, or somewhere else? You have competition from other airports. What about Aero Country right here in McKinney? What if they commercialize Aero Country, Mr. Mayor? Huh? What about that?
Wouldn't that be fantastic? Now, if that was the move, you'd see me on the other side of the issue. People talk about Sherman, they talk about Grayson, and they say, hey, they've got a 10,000-foot runway. But again, lacking you got to go one layer deep, right? So what is that 10,000-foot runway? Is it built to be able to handle commercial passenger service? And with just the slightest bit of effort, you will find it's very readily available to each and every person that does their homework. No, it doesn't support passenger service at all. You'd have to completely redo that airport. Well, why don't they? I don't know, because nobody wants to spend $500 million on a market that would not support passenger service today. Will it in 20 years? Maybe. But right now, that's not where the encatchment area is. That's not where the airline industries identify as the next market, and no one's going to invest $500 million to redo that runway. So to say that they, to latch onto their runway's 10,000 feet, well, if that was the only criteria, and you ignore, is the market there? Will the airlines go there? Is the encatchment area large enough? And does that runway support the type of traffic that would have to be? When you realize that the answer to all of those questions are no, you can't ignore those things, right? It's not enough to have one aspect. And in that case, again, just the distance, not even the construction. So, yeah, it's tough for me to deal with listening to all that stuff. The people talk about Alliance Airport. Man, the last thing I want us to be is Alliance Airport. I don't want 180,000 freight flights flying in and out of our airport 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. You want to talk about traffic. You want to talk about trucks and truck traffic and all that. Do we run that risk? Yeah, we absolutely do. We run that risk of, and by the way, that risk is there whether we have passenger service or not. But if we establish passenger service and we are successful, as we and the airlines that are in tow believe it will be, that crowds out other operations. It crowds out. Oh, she wants to get in on the act.
That's right.
It crowds out training operations. It crowds out the touch and goes. It crowds out people and companies looking at potential freight operations. So nothing is guaranteed. I can't say that the two couldn't coexist. Mm-hmm. My hope is it doesn't, because you want to talk about not being happy about traffic, air traffic. Have flights 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, to the tune of, the numbers that Alliance has.
Respectfully, Mr. Mayor, how in the world do you feel confident in telling us that that's not going to happen? That would be a nightmare scenario. I cannot imagine how furious people are going to be if we end up with every single airplane coming in and out all hours of the night, respectfully to the Amazons and FedExes and giant corporate oligarchs.
Amazons that already built a facility out there.
That's right.
That Amazon.
Whatever. Fine. I will concede that there's already an Amazon facility right next door. But I asked them, and they don't use the airport, okay? So how about you chill out about that? So how in the world can you tell us that if this thing progresses and there's not public outcry, that we somehow are successful in shutting down you disgusting capitalists that aren't listening to the voters, how in the world can you tell us with certainty that we're not going to turn into some commercial freight hub nightmare?
Yeah, and sadly I can't. I can't tell you that we won't have freight operations that develop alongside a passenger. What I can tell you is, as the entity responsible for that airport, what we can do is proactively do the types of things that we're doing. Guide growth of the airport in a way that best serves the community. What would have the most positive impact? I will tell you, all day long passenger service has a far greater impact than freight. Our general aviation airport and those operations are very beneficial. Where we don't have a lot of benefit is training operations. Absolutely don't. Though, people hear me say that use the airport for that today. Hate to hear me say that, but the reality is there's no real benefit to you or I for people that are, flying around doing touch and goes and flying over the rooftops and flying.
That's what Aero Country is for.
Aero Country is great for that, but they use our airport. We have if you're going to do training in for a where you have a air traffic control and you have to handle yourself in the big boy stage, Aero Country is not that. Our airport is, as our other airports. So all we can do again is make decisions and put in place things and infrastructure that will continue to attract the large companies that have been attracted to this area, that have parked corporate jet assets at the airport, which pay property and school tax without sending little jets to schools, and they don't go to our parks and they don't drive on our roads. Those are all real beneficial things for our community. And then again, the passenger service and the social, cultural, financial benefit that will bring. We can make decisions to try to jumpstart that, if you will, or support that activity. That's what we can do. But as an FAA-funded airport, at the end of the day, we're compelled to allow any aeronautical-approved operations. Period. We can't discriminate against them. So, I'd hate to think that we go asleep on this issue, and 5 years from now we wake up and we all look at what happened at the airport on its own. My guess is that there will be a whole lot of people, Monday morning quarterbacking that and would be looking at city council and really criticizing leadership for this period of time that didn't do the things that they had the ability to do and could have done to guide that growth to be one type of growth that benefits our community. That will be what people are saying in 5 years. They won't be talking if we're successful with passenger service, and I'm here to tell you that flights will be flying out of here in 2026. But if we had an alternate universe where that wasn't happening, the complaints from the community would be the things that we didn't do with relation to the service.
So what you're saying is that growth is an investment, and I think you actually mentioned earlier, there are growing pains, and we have to make hard decisions.
There's going to be some growing pains. When we elected to widen Virginia, that was tough on a lot of people. When we widened the streets and redid the streets down on the square, I had a business there. We actually didn't survive that. We were one of the casualties. My wife's little business on the square with a couple other friends was a casualty of all that construction. So why did we do it? Well, we did it because we needed to do it for the greater good and for the future of our downtown.
You mean to tell me that you took personal interest and recognized that although something was not beneficial for you personally, that went against your own preferences, that went against what you wanted, that you were still somehow able to find the character and the moral fortitude to recognize that there may be certain things that are great for your community and your city, even if you don't personally agree with them and find them tasteful?
You know, I'd love to say that there wasn't any part of me that wasn't like, yeah, I can't believe this. I mean, that's hard. You started a little business. Again, for us, we're blessed, and it wasn't our livelihood. It was much more of a business out of just wanting to do something like that, not needing to do something. But was it frustrating that the streets were torn up as long as they were and the utilities going in? Yeah, it sure was. But at the end of the day, as my wife and I said, you know what, what are we going to do? Ignore that? Imagine if we didn't redo that. Imagine if we didn't redo the Impact Center. Imagine if that was still fenced in with chain link fence and it was really just home to pigeons and boarded up. What if we didn't redo all the streets that we did? Where would we be today with that downtown? What you want to talk about an inconvenience? Man, try doing that today. So, there's growing pains anytime. And whenever you're talking about infrastructure and having to keep that infrastructure up to date, especially when, again, you are the fastest growing city and the fastest growing county in the country, quite frankly, when we have issues that we have that are different than other or other metro areas, we were TxDOT. Listen, I love TxDOT. I have a great relationship with the people at TxDOT, and they're working with us very, very well on a number of projects. Was there a missed opportunity over the last 3 decades on 380? Absolutely. And it put all of us in a bind today. That's extremely unfortunate. But what do? Do we wait for another 20 years? Do we wait till we're 2 million in this county? Do we wait till our growth in the city of McKinney has grown past the outer loop before we start incurring that growing pain and whatnot that's going to come with 380 and the bypass? And believe me, that's going to be a headache for years. It sucks. It does. But at the end of the day, if you're going to continue to grow and you're going to match that growth with infrastructure, that's just going to happen. And it's no different than the airport.
So I think I'm done with playing the part. I think I will just take that hat off and set it aside. Because we're running out of time, and we told you 4 o'clock, and you got stuff to do. When I look at the way that I think all of this is going to go, and my wife and I are here permanently. We're not ever leaving McKinney. I can't think of a good reason to leave McKinney. DFW is the best market in the country for us to live in, and McKinney is the best city in the best market for us to live in. We'll buy a house in Colorado someday, buy a cabin in Tennessee, and whatever. But I don't see us ever leaving a residency in McKinney. When I look at the future, 10 years from now, tell me if this is compatible with what you think is going to happen. If I were to peek into 10 years from now in McKinney's future, I see an airport that is, 10 gates of commercial passenger travel, somewhere in that area. I see an amphitheater that is fueled by vigorous tourist traffic from regional guests coming from this whole part of the country that hop on an airplane, spend an hour in the air, come here and stay in our hotels, attend an event at our amphitheater, maybe a sporting event at the football stadium or whatever, or
Go to eat at a
they're
restaurant.
going to eat at a restaurant. They buy stuff on the square. This supports tax revenue. This supports EDC and CDC directly. Whose
And
budget
our general fund.
and our general fund of the city. Property taxes are stabilized. School taxes are more reasonable because of reforms that have happened in the 10 years between now and then at the state level that fixes the absolutely broken system of public education funding in Texas. It's
No doubt.
horrific.
Yep.
And McKinney overall is what? 350, 360 a decade from now?
Probably going to be up there. We're growing probably 7,000 people a year.
Okay. So it'll be 310, 320
Yep.
a decade from now. The airport is a completely normal factor of life. Instead of people driving down to Love Field, people from Richardson drive to McKinney. People from Las Colinas, they would prefer Southwest over American, so they drive to McKinney instead of Love Field. And I know no airlines have been announced, but this is me dreaming. 10 years from now, we have 5 airlines that fly out of TKI. The usual suspects and a couple of discount airlines that everybody hates, but they still fly them because it's the cheapest air ticket.
Oh, yeah.
Am I on the right track here?
Listen, in 10 years, I will tell you in 1 year, we're going to have commercial traffic, commercial planes, flights out of TKI. In 10 years, yeah, it'll be more like 8-10 gates. And I will tell you, and again, I don't mean this to sound flippant, but people will realize the world didn't end. McKinney didn't end. McKinney, matter of fact, really flourished with the addition of passenger service. That our restaurants, our businesses, our hospitality businesses, just our community as a whole will see a huge benefit. But they will realize that planes aren't buzzing the rooftops, and matter of fact, if they hadn't lived through all of this discussion and they never were flying, they wouldn't even know that that those flights were happening out at the airport, because again, they're taking off and landing from the north and the south, and our community is truly, for almost without exception, untouched by that in any impactful way, visually or else. So people will realize, man, the world didn't end, and maybe they'll look back and say, I probably should have done a little more research instead of just regurgitating all the stuff I saw online and all the baseless allegations, and people I think will reflect back on this time and realize, man, there was something more to it than they took the time to understand.
So as we record this episode, Bill Cox is the only official candidate for mayor currently. Other people are expected to throw their name in the hat at some point. Charlie Phillips, who you and I both obviously know reasonably well, you much better than I because you've been on council with him for a number of years. He has withdrawn his name from consideration after Bill Cox came out. It appears almost a certainty that Bill Cox is elected mayor just because of his body of work and his reputation and all of those things. Let's assume Bill Cox is elected mayor. What does that mean for the airport? What authority does Bill, as mayor, as a member of council, is all of this done, written in stone? It's going to happen. The expansion is happening. The grants, everything here. Let's see that I am still, and I'm not being facetious, let's say that I am against the entire notion of an airport expansion. Is there still any avenue for me to pursue to fight this, so to speak, or is it as done a deal as it can possibly be?
Yeah, and so when I answer this, listen, I think that anybody that is in opposition should voice that. I would only ask they do it respectfully, and by respectfully, I don't mean just in the way they communicate, but actually take the time to understand the facts. It's so much easier and better to have a discussion based in fact versus hyperbole versus nonsense versus ignorance. So take the time. But then if someone's opposed to it, continue to express it. Where do I think it's going to be? We will be signing. We're within probably 45 days from signing the agreement, the term sheet with the airlines. We have already approved the site plan for the terminal. for this first version of the Terminal 1.0. So I'm here to tell you the airport is, at least as far as what I believe based on all actions to date, the airport is happening. Passenger service is happening. And people think, well, once Fuller is out, then we can stop the airport. I don't. Somehow I'm the face of it, not by choice. I guess I'm more outspoken than maybe others on council.
Just a smidge.
Just a smidge.
Yeah.
I don't run from a fight, I guess. I don't necessarily want the fight, but I won't run from it. And I do believe that it's important to have actual facts when you're having conversations. So I call those out who don't speak in fact. But the reality is, this airport and every decision to date, with almost no exception, there's been, I can count 4 times there's been a vote the other way. But there, in the last, 6 years, 7 years, it has been unanimous by all of City Council, previous and current. And before that, the previous council that elected to purchase the FBO to guide the growth of the airport back in 2014-15. Every council member, every council, past, partial, full now, the EDC, the CDC, TERS, P&Z, County Commissioners Court, who played a role in helping fund the extension of the runway, Senator Angela Paxton, who secured $15 million from the state in that same effort as we pursue passenger service, Senator Ted Cruz, who has written the bill that I talked about earlier, Keith Self, Congressman Keith Self, all of the people I just mentioned are huge advocates for the airport.
Yeah.
Huge advocates for the airport. Our Attorney General, huge advocate for the airport. So every decision that's been made has not been George Fuller. It's been the body of 49 elected and/or appointed officials on different commissions and councils and bodies, not just locally but countywide, who have made these decisions, who see the same thing that I see.
Yeah.
And people say, they say a lot of things. One thing that this democracy is set up, right, to accomplish is people elect us on the elected side. They elect us. And what do they expect from us? They expect me to make decisions for this community, not on what I read on McKinney Citizen to Citizen or some other site with some silo of echo chamber stuff. That they expect me to make decisions based on a lot of due diligence, a lot of work, understanding all the facts, understanding what the risks are, what the rewards are, how does that play out, what is the impact in every which way, from environmental, if we're talking about the airport, to fiscally. That's what they expect of their elected official, and we make decisions based on that. Unfortunately, in today's world, a lot of what we see on these sites and whatnot, and I'm not blaming them. Before I was mayor, I couldn't have told you 95% of what I talked about today. I didn't dive deep into the airport. I didn't understand the economic impact. I didn't understand flight patterns. I didn't understand environmental assessments. I didn't understand direct, indirect jobs to the extent that I ever put the effort to try to understand it. I didn't understand any of that. All I knew, basically, before I was mayor, I could have known if I took the time. I can assure you I would not have opened my mouth about it until I took the time. If I was going to engage in a conversation, I come knowing what I'm going to talk about.
Load your gun before you fight.
Load the gun before I fight. But to be fair to 99% of residents out there, that's not what they're doing. What are they doing? They're getting up and going to work. They're raising their family. They're taking care of their business. What they expect with that immense $400 I get paid a month is for me to take my time and spend the 50 hours a week into diving into those details, which I do, and certainly arguably overpaid at $400 a month. But that's what they expect from us. And so the decisions they're seeing us make is not based on the rhetoric about, the community said we don't want commercial service. That's not what the community said. The community said X.
Yeah.
They didn't say this. So anyway, that's what they expect. That's what I will continue to do until the day I retire.
Last thing I'll say here, just as a closing the lid on the what the people have said thing, and then we'll let you get back to your afternoon. Fred, are you on the mayor's payroll?
I am not on the mayor's
Has the mayor
payroll.
or any of his supporters ever paid you for anything? to say or to do anything in your role as a
Never.
co-host of this podcast or as an
Absolutely
admin of
not.
McKinney Cares?
Not even.
Has George ever contacted you and instructed you to say or to do anything on his behalf?
We have had no personal communication, public, any of that.
What about any of his people, any of his
None.
proxies?
None of them.
No?
No.
So you're not a mouthpiece for George and his gang?
Not his neighbor, not smoke signals. I am not, as I say, opinion adjacent or any of those things.
Now I'm greatly offended because I'm accused of being the puppet master. I mean,
Well-
don't I have any puppets? Do I have
Well,
anybody?
And on the other side of that equation, in the last 2 weeks, these are direct quotes, I have been called a mouthpiece, a spokesperson, a bootlicker, a sycophant, a what was it? Puppet. Yeah, it's been called puppet multiple times.
You're called Nazi.
I was called a Nazi. I was called a narcissist. I was called
Power tripping.
a power tripping, an attention-seeking little whore.
Yes.
Yeah, that
I
was
apologize for that one.
that was a private message.
I apologize for saying that.
No. But just to be clear, Mr. Mayor, have you ever given me any instructions to say or to do anything on your behalf?
No, sir. And because we have disagreed on some things and we agree on things. And unfortunately, if you agree, then you're the enemy, and we're part of some corrupt
Cabal.
cabal.
Yeah, it's such a great word.
I must let me just say this other thing. I was talking to somebody the other day, and they were saying nobody is in favor of the airport. And this is one of the 25 people that showed up at the environmental assessment. And I said, really, nobody? There's nobody I've talked to. I said, well, let's challenge that for a minute.
How big's your sample size there, Brenda?
Well, and I said, well, one thing we certainly should be able to agree on is 42 out of 100 people not only said they were in favor of the airport, they were in favor of the airport and the city going into property tax-backed debt to the tune of $200 million plus another $100 million from EDC and CDC, and for which the city was going to impose a tax, as far as they read on the ballot, would impose a tax to pay that back. 42 out of 100 said, we want the airport bad enough that I'm going to sign up for this unknown tax that you're going to impose. 42. Yeah. Of the other 58, I asked the person, I said, first I said, can you agree with me there? That you say nobody. Well, here's 42 that not only support the airport, supported it with all that. I said, so out of the 58 out of 100, I said, do you think, what percentage of those people do you think were opposed to the debt? Because certainly you got to imagine some people were opposed to the financial, the tax implication. Well, yeah, some. Well, how many? Maybe 30%, but that doesn't matter. They still said no.
Is it more than 8?
Yeah, I know.
Because if it's more than 8%,
yeah.
Well, now we have a completely different conversation.
Right.
Exactly. And I told him, I said, if you can concede that you can't say nobody when 42 signed up for it with hundreds of millions of dollars of debt.
Yeah.
And 58, out of that 58, what percentage were opposed to the debt? Because I can't tell you how many people came up to me, including, by the way, one of the biggest detractors, Tom McKerrow. And I like Tom and I hate Tom at the same time. I think he has the same relationship with me. But I want to like Tom. And Tom said to me, I'll never forget one time, he goes, he was worried about airlines weren't going to show up and we're going to be on the hook for all this debt. And that was the problem. And he said if it wasn't for the debt, he might be in favor of the airport. That's Tom McKerrow who said that to me. And he represents the extreme opposition. So imagine, my point is, you got the point. How many people supported the airport, not the debt?
The existential question that I'll leave you with, and I know you don't have a good answer for it, how in the world do we get people to the polls to vote? Because there are existentially critical things being determined at the ballot box, and we can't get more than 20,000 votes total in an election. I understand, the beautiful thing is it was a presidential cycle, so we had more than 80,000 votes cast on Prop A, Prop B, Prop C, Prop D, but that fell in line with a presidential general election.
Yep.
Really doesn't happen at the midterms, definitely doesn't happen in off-cycle years. How in the world do we help local citizens understand how important the simple act of voting, of taking 20 minutes out of your day, one day, once a year, maybe twice a year if you're a primary voter, to just pause your life long enough and recognize how important the act of voicing your opinion intelligently is. How do we get people to the polls, George?
You know, I was listening to somebody talk. Who was it that was talking about? It's just another effort. There's all kinds of efforts, right, to make voting easier. If they have to go to the polls, I don't know that we're ever going to change it. Apathy is just too great. People don't take the time. But boy, one day, right? We handle our finances, our bank accounts on our phone. One day, if there was a safe and secure way to have an election, maybe we'd have a greater success in getting people to vote. And I know that there's a lot of people talking about how do we move in that direction with technology the way it is, but I don't know that we'll ever get voter turnout. Our situation is not unique to us. It's not indigenous to McKinney on local politics. And some people say, well, why don't we just move local politics in line with national politics? That certainly would get more people to the ballot box. However, what I would challenge on that is, man, the dynamics of a local nonpartisan election are so much different than a partisan national election. And so hopefully the people that are showing up, the 20,000 people that are showing up, hopefully they're doing their work, right? Yeah. They're doing some homework, and they're going to the ballot box with an idea of who they're supporting and why they're supporting them. I would tell you that that's wishful thinking, right? Because even in that example, most of the time they're there because of the one person they know, right? They're there because their neighbor's running for school board, and that's why they're there. And they don't take the time to research the others. However, we have a greater chance, at least on the local election cycle, for people to get engaged, do their homework, and show up, and not just be there, pushing a blue or red, lever on everything. And then, of course, they come to local elections. Most there'd at least be a great number of people didn't even know there was a local election on the ballot. I can't tell you how many times I talked to people. Did you vote? There was an election. Yeah, there was an election. Anyway, so I don't have an answer. It's maybe one day we'll make voting as convenient as ordering your Starbucks on your phone, and maybe we'll get more participation. What I hope, though, is we get more engagement.
Yeah, and
more people educated on who's running, what are their values, what are their principles, what do they support, and do they align with theirs, and then get out and vote with purpose, and not just checking a box that, hey, I got to go vote.
Fred, anything you want to end with? I know you've done more sitting than normal in this episode.
Yeah, no, and that's fine, because it's I love the point counterpoint of it all, and just the urgency for people to get informed. We can't just say that one side is an echo chamber. From what I've seen, both sides are echo chambers.
Absolutely.
And it's no good just to fall in line and repeat the same thing. And you summed it up there. Make an informed choice. You didn't say vote for or against something. You just said, go out, do your research, get your information, and cast your ballot. Because for me, voting is one of those things that is America. The freedom to cast a vote is something that that's not nation, that's not worldwide. That's something that that's a basic principle of who we are as the United States.
Well, in this election, there's going to be plenty of opportunity for people to get to go see and hear from the candidates. Mm-hmm. Man, take the time. Take the time to go to a town hall. Take the time to go to a debate. Take the time to go to their website. If you're relying on whatever group and tribe you're in online, man, you're in trouble. I love kind of back to the airport for a quick second. Oscar Wilde, said that cynics know the cost of everything and the value of nothing. Mm-hmm. Man, that is rampant, and certainly in politics, you see that manifest in so much. But I'll say that also transcends into the political arena. They'll have the whatever they're latching onto in their tribe of why they might be against a Bill Cox or a Charlie Phillips or whoever else might get in the race. What they feel the cost is, i.e., they might support the airport. And understand the value. in what that proposition is. Understand the value in the candidate. Understand those things before you just, before you go out and open your mouth or press a lever at the ballot box.
Mm-hmm. Amen.
One of the things that we firmly believe, it's kind of a core principle of this podcast, is that on issues, we're not going to be neutral. Somebody was blasting me because I said, and maybe I shouldn't have said it as directly as I did. I pulled a little George Fuller and went straight for it. I said, I have not heard a single argument against the airport that is not grounded in selfishness or ignorance, one or the other. And I got excoriated by dozens of people who was like, I can't believe you were They're like, why? How dare you? You're an admin of this group. And I was like, I'm sorry, you must have misunderstood something. We're not going to be neutral on issues that we think are important for McKinney. Politically, we're absolutely going to stay neutral. We're interviewing Bill Cox in that seat tomorrow afternoon. And if somebody else comes along and puts their name in the hat, we will interview them in that seat too. I've already talked to Michael Jones and some other folks, Jure and other people. We don't really have a go-to voice for emceeing political conversations in this city. Fred and I seem to be a decent fit for moderating a debate and asking hard questions of all the candidates. So who knows? Maybe this spring at some point you will see Fred and I grilling political candidates on how they plan to make things better for our city. But when it comes to politics, Fred and I are going to stay completely neutral.
That's right.
While we may have personal beliefs one way or the other, Jure Feltus is my councilwoman. She's in seat District 3. I went to Leadership McKinney with her. I'm voting for Jure. I don't care who comes against her.
Yeah.
And I'm voting for Jure. That's me speaking as James, the private citizen. But as a co-host of this podcast, I will never endorse Jure. This podcast will never endorse Jure or any other political candidate. And I think that is incredibly important for these conversations to be useful. So people know, the podcast is not George Fuller's lapdog, or whoever comes after you, Bill Cox or somebody else. The public needs to be able to hear conversations with understanding that it's going to be educational and informative and entertaining to some degree. Somebody laughed during that little exchange for ridiculousness and whatnot. Some people got super mad because they don't like being made fun of, because people don't like having their ridiculous behavior called out. To those people, I offer no apologies. If you're mad, it's your own problem. And that response also makes some people mad. But at the end of the day, I don't really care.
Well, when you say ignorance is it's not necessarily an offensive word at all. It's meaning that they haven't taken the time to understand the facts and the issues.
The difference between ignorance and stupidity is the Grand Canyon between the two of them. Ignorance is simply a lack of appropriate amount of information. Stupidity is you possess the information and you're still dumb and make foolish statements, even though you possess the necessary information to make smart statements. Ignorance is not stupidity, folks. Don't misquote me. I didn't say you were stupid, just said you're ignorant.
Yeah, no doubt. And ignorance is curable.
It is completely curable.
It's
go
curable.
to the city's website
Without a prescription.
Read the report without a prescription. Is there an index? Because someone can go to a search function on the website and look for documents.
They can just go to tkifly.com, and that'll take you.
It's all there.
Right. Yep. Take you right there.
So there you go. That'll be in the show notes. TKI, as in Tango Kilo India, Fly, FLY. So Foxtrot Lima Yankee.com. Yep. For those of you that like the alphanumerics. Is there anything else, man? I know we've gone through a lot here.
No, I appreciate you guys taking the time to do it, and it's an important subject. And all that was said, I understand some people are going to be opposed to the airport, and they do understand the facts, and they're going to be opposed for whatever reason, and they have their reasoning. They're entitled to, and they may very well be valid. But I have to look at everything not in a vacuum, but those points versus what are the pros. And so, I will be marching forward on this topic until May 2nd or whatever date it is that I am out of the office. And I'm really happy, and I know that the community is going to benefit greatly with passenger service at the airport. So I feel blessed to have been a small part of its journey.
And just for clarity, it's not so that people can say how amazing George was.
No, I want people to talk about well, they can say that if they want.
That is an option.
My wife won't even say that. Listen, I don't want in 5 years. I feel very strongly, of course, what this will do at the airport. There's no "I told you so" at that point. I want, number one, I want to be right, because if I'm wrong, then it's not going to be the benefit to the community. My decisions are based in the community. Again, I don't own property at the airport. I am not profiting from this airport. I have done nothing but devalue my business since I got elected mayor, and that I ignore it almost completely. It's been a financial strain to be mayor. To an extent, I've been blessed to put myself in a position where I could handle the strain, but nonetheless, contrary to those nonsensical comments, everything that I and the rest of council, I can speak for all of council. No one's in this for the money. No one's in this. There is no money. There's no backside. There's no nothing. We're in it because we actually care. You talked about Jeray. Jeray, man, what a class act.
Love her.
I mean, she is a class act. She is a woman that she cares about people. She's compassionate. She cares about this community. She takes her position very seriously. She does her homework, and she takes all of that, all the pressure she gets in the community and all that very, very personally. It weighs on her. It weighs on her with this opposition. It weighs on her. She doesn't just latch on to what's the positive stuff. She takes on all the negative stuff and struggles and does the work to make the best decision because she cares. She cares.
Yep.
And takes time from her family and her profession to do it. So, again, the cynics out there, they don't see that. They
no.
They sit behind a keyboard and type what they want to type. Doesn't matter that they say things about our families, about our ethics. They just, anything is a weapon to use, and when you're just, I guess, in opposition to something, and integrity is not something you care about. So it's, I don't know why I got off on that tangent, but you talk about Dre, I can't help to be moved by how quality of a person she is.
Well, I have a hard time staying unbiased when it comes to Dre. I just think the world of her. She's an incredible person. I just admire her at every possible level. She doesn't have anybody who's on paper as going up against her yet. And if you're listening, like, no one's officially come out, right? Have I missed something?
Not that I know of, unless they did last day or so and I missed it.
Okay. Yeah, whoever you are thinking about running against Dre, you better bring your A game, because she is top-tier talent. And if you think you're going to take District 3 away from someone of that caliber, good luck.
No, she's great. She's great. And make no mistake, she cares.
Yeah. I think we're good.
I think we're good.
We did some rambling there at the end. All of us did. But, hey.
Yeah, but you know what, though? One thing I'm going to say is make sure that for those of you who tune in, whether it's through the podcast or through the YouTube, that they chime in. What were the points? What additional questions?
For
did they
or
have?
against?
That's right.
What did we miss? Hey, Tom Murphy, was that good enough? Am I enough of a bootlicker? You said that if I didn't ask the hard questions, that you were going to give me crap. Did I ask enough hard questions? I'm looking right at the camera, Tom. We good? I'll see you in the comment section, buddy. All right. We're good. This has been another episode of the McKinney Podcast. And I will say, some of those questions that I asked earlier came straight from Tom Murphy. So I got to give him credit for that. As I told him in the comment section, hey, you bring up some good questions, I will definitely be passing those along. So anybody who wants to say, why are you calling somebody out? You're just a bully. Well, I'm also giving them props because they had good questions.
But, those same people that say we're a bully, because I get the same thing, are on a public forum saying what they're saying.
Yeah.
But you hold them accountable for what they're saying.
Yeah.
And we're a bully.
Yep.
That's crazy.
It is crazy. And yet it continues, and it's not ever going to stop.
I grew up with a father that said, George, you say something, you better take responsibility.
Words have consequences.
And be accountable.
That's right.
And, boy, I didn't know the answer is when someone holds me accountable, I should just say you're a bully.
Yeah, seems to work for some people.
If I do that, then I don't have to care about what I say because I won't worry about being challenged.
Man, I got to stop this episode. We're going to go down another rabbit trail. Y'all take care. Have a great day. Thank you for watching. Hit me up in the comment section. Send us an email to mail@McKinneyPodcast.com if you think we're just idiots and buffoons, and tell us exactly why we are. And if you think we're great, well, dang it, tell us that too.
That's right.
Y'all take care.